Welcome to the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Lori Rivers with you, and I am here to help you with your inspiration to get those aspirations moving in the world. On today's episode, we're talking about Mercury Retrograde and how that plays into the wild and woolly energy of May 2022. And I'm also going to roast Bill Maher's chart because, well, I've always thought he was a twat waffle. So buckle up and get ready for another wild episode. As always, with big thanks to our patrons, because without them, there is no podcast. All right, it is Mercury Retrograde, and we are looking at some pretty serious issues that are up on deck. And the great thing about Mercury Retrograde right now is it will be hard to move anything through, but that's also the bad news. So if they try to codify abortion as an okay thing, it's not going to pass. And we're already seeing the Democrats, the older Democrats, the people who are ancient of days, already doing the same damn shit they've always done, and which is not necessarily fight as hard as we need. So the majority of my listeners identify as female or have been socialized as female in life. And so I kind of want to encourage you as we look at the current situation to understand that patriarchy is not going to walk itself out the door. It's just not. It's not going to walk itself out the door. It's not going to just pick up its own bags. We're in the last stage of the Pluto and Capricorn transit, and it's so important for you guys to understand that you have to unpack this inside of you. You want to hex the patriarchy, have at it, but understand there are parts of you that have that in yourself. So some of this to unpack during Mercury retrograde, because remember, Mercury is retrograde in Gemini. That's our thoughts, our ideals, the things that we have learned. Okay, so we're reviewing the things we learned. One of those things is we've been taught that women are weak, and equating physical capability to strength and dominance. And the thing is one, not all women are weak. I've known some pretty strong women. And two, strength isn't the only way that we can defend ourselves. There's mental defense, there's emotional defense, and physical defense does not always require strength. And I know this because I was a Taekwondo mom for many years, and not Olympic style Taekwondo. Nope, Chung Moo Kwan, which is kind of like street fighting Taekwondo. It's the real deal. And I learned a fair bit. And I have moved all over the world as a young woman, and even as an older woman, moved about the country on my own, traveled by myself. And people be like, aren't you afraid? And I'd be like, no. I know how to defend myself. And the first weapon we have is our mind. So as we look at Mercury retrograde, remembering you have a mind, and to be aware and not buy into the social cultural conditioning doesn't mean you run into danger. Okay? In fact, that's the first rule. Use your brain. The second rule is use your voice. That's your most important weapon is your mind. The second is your voice, and our voices are powerful. Okay, and I'm not talking about screaming on social media. I'm not talking about doing a bunch of TikToks. I'm talking if you're walking down the street and somebody, is threatening, that voice and screaming fire. Of course, we all know that, right? Because nobody's going to come if you yell help, unfortunately. And then the third and final is the physical. And it's not about decking people. It's not about that. There's lots of self-defense techniques. I highly suggest people always go for a self-defense course if you can. And regardless, because we've been taught, we need that male protection. And one of the things that I think is going to be up during this Mercury retrograde is kind of a pushback against my dog's got my cords. There we go. A pushback against some of that divine masculine, divine feminine talk, or at least I hope it is. I will egg that on, because a lot of it is patriarchy repackaged. That feeling soft and pliant, and needing a man for protection. And I stitched a video in my story the other day, so it's gone now. But I stitched a video where this woman was like putting together a couch and was like, "I'm tired of being in my masculine." And I'm like, it's a tool. We're human beings, okay? As somebody who studied anthropology, let me assure you, things that require tools are not gendered activities. Gendered things, especially when we think of the concept of gender, it's a social construct, okay? You are capable of using tools because guess what? You are a human being. We don't come out going, "Oh, you're this, so you can only do this." Those are all social and cultural constructs. They're not real, but they do get taught as fact. And that's what we have to unpack in ourselves as we move through this very interesting month of May. When I did the year ahead, there's a Malcolm shaking it off. When I did the year ahead forecast back in December of 2021, when I started looking at May, June, July, August, in through the election, which has an eclipse on it. That's a future podcast episode. I was like, what the hell is going to happen? What the hell is going to happen to shock us that hasn't already happened? Because there's some shocks that are on the way. I think we can get a much bigger picture right now because it's political mayhem. This is political mayhem. And you have to remember that reasoning with people that believe very, very strongly about things doesn't necessarily always work. So trying to educate and have conversations it's very hard to undo belief because of cognitive dissonance. So you'll see people trying that approach, but I'll also counter in the spiritual realm that whole need to be positive all the time, that whole don't be physical, is very dangerous as well, and it's disenfranchising, because if good people and people of goodwill are not willing to be active and involved and just want to do some spell work or just, manifest with their minds, that kind of bullshit, we're going to end up in a situation that requires actual political resistance in a very different way. And as a political astrologer, I'm just going to say that concerns me. Because again, we've all been socialized, with rare exceptions. We've all been socialized to believe, we're not strong enough, we're not fast enough, we're not able. Well, and some of that just isn't true. Okay, some of that just isn't true. So women have always been very capable, very handy, and quite able to move forward. And it is the social and cultural programming that often holds us back. Yes, bad things can happen to us, absolutely. But I can say from personal experience, having gone through prolonged CSA as well as having SA in my 20s, it's not worse than death. It's really not. There's other things worse. I'm not saying enjoy it either. It's not. But it doesn't destroy who you are. It does not have to have that effect. It does not have to have that impact on you. It was the belief that it did that held me back. Okay, once I realized that my future, my mind, my body is my own, and that an event or series of events did not define who I was as a person, as a woman, as an individual, as a spiritual being having a human experience. When I did that and I took actually my power into myself, that the people who harmed me in various occasions in life held no more power over me. And so I know that's a hard concept because we've wanted to know, we've wanted to have our pain recognized. And it is a painful experience. I'm not going to say it isn't. But at the same time, this is why I've been pushing and pushing the last couple of years, saying, hey, you can't just identify with the story of what has happened, or you disempower yourself. And I spent many years, very disempowered because of the pain and the trauma, etc., until I made a decision. And I can't even necessarily tell you the day. I can't necessarily tell you what was going on. I made a decision to own my life and own my power, and took all of my metaphysical training, because I had spent so long, I was so into healing. I was always finding new things to heal. Malcolm. Really? Come here. Listeners, that's Malcolm, my dog, causing mayhem and madness. So when you're constantly looking for new things to heal and things like that, and I'm not saying don't do the healing work. This is it's intense stuff. But if you're always looking for the healing path, you're not looking for the thriving path. You're going down those rabbit holes. So accessing and understanding what you have healed and celebrating that helps you recognize the forward progress, is what I'm trying to say. Mercury is retrograde, so pardon me if it feels like I'm misspeaking. So these are all things to unpack in ourselves. And again, not condoning any crappy shit that happens in life. I'm just saying it doesn't need to define us. Malcolm, no. Hey, no. Come here, up. Come on. Malcolm. Oh, he's being so naughty today. So those are things I'm talking about. And I know it's hard. I didn't say it was easy, but these are all things that the idea that we're somehow diminished because of our experiences is actually patriarchy in action, because our value has been about being virtuous and above reproach and unsullied and all of those crazy things where we're human, and things happen, and none of those things devalue us as individuals. So if you want to be in your power, the most subversive thing you can do is understand your value. And we have Venus in Aries right now. And Venus in Aries wasn't very popular with the Greeks because it was an uppity woman with opinions. An uppity woman with opinions who knew what she wanted. Like I said, with Jupiter moving into Aries tonight, I think we're going to see Lady Gaga start to kind of go off the rails. I would love to hear what she has to say. I'm sure she's full of opinions and trying to decide how she's going to do that. Because she has Venus in Aries. So Jupiter is going to magnify her voice because her Venus in Aries is in the third house. So Jupiter going in there is going to be like a megaphone. So for all of you who have Venus and Aries, just understand as Jupiter comes towards that. And it won't go all the way through Aries right now. Jupiter, as it ingresses tonight, it's only going to go just so far before it retrogrades this year, but we're getting a real sneak peek at 2023 with this. The other thing that we get this month, let's talk about this month. We've got Mercury in retrograde, and that's why I've been talking about unpacking the ideas and ideals you've been programmed with as we've, been socialized. Socialization is actually indoctrination. Okay. And so what does this have to do with astrology? Everything, right? Everything. And it's fairly ubiquitous, you see extremes in different spaces, but astrology, we see everything in it. That's why if you want to be a really, really good astrologer, you want to study as many different kinds of things as you can. Okay, every different kind of subject you can, whether it's politics, astrology, underwater basket weaving, because astrological rulerships govern so many different things. And so we can see everything. If you know how to look for it, if you know what the definitions are, if you know how to properly observe and correlate information. So a lot of times people jump to conclusions. That's why I did that video on TikTok where I said, hey, not everything that happens on the evening of the 10th has to do with Mercury retrograde. Some of it is Jupiter ingressing into Aries. And in fact, if it's big, if it's aggressive, if it's bold, if it's fiery, that's Jupiter. You know, that boom, I am here. That's Jupiter. And it is sextile Mercury retrograde. So because Mercury is in Gemini, it's hitting about 4 degrees. So once Jupiter gets to 0 degrees Aries, it's in a sextile to Mercury retrograde. And so there will be some big news. That's why I said big headlines. And it's really important not to just be offended at this moment. And allow our energy to go out and be scattered. It's very important to be very, very deliberate right now. Okay. And look for organizations. That's why in the Awake Space Discord, we have lists and links to different groups you can be involved with. As far as privacy is concerned, you delete everything off your phone. They've probably already recorded data, and it doesn't matter what apps. It doesn't matter. As long as you have a cell phone, if you've had a conversation with a friend. But ask yourself, are they really gunning for you? It's in America, we really don't have very good action on us. Smaller countries do. I've had to deal with that. So if you've ever had to deal with that kind of thing, we're not very good at it here because it's a very large population base. So it really requires something like what China has. It really has to do with like in China, the reason they're able to do it is they've got their whole society snitches on each other, so. There you go. It just depends on what the headlines are going to be. I'm not going to make any big... I've said it would be leaks, more leaks. I think there might be some arson. I don't think it's necessarily all political. There could be some big fires break out. I'm responding to Becky in the comments here. Here, I'll put that on screen so you guys can see. But headline-wise, it could be that. It could be, again, old information coming up. And again, I'm talking about just tonight because as you know, when a planet ingresses into another sign, it's representative of a large burst of energy. And it doesn't matter which planet, but we are talking about Jupiter. And Jupiter's just big to start with. It's more is more is more is more. I know people consider Jupiter the great benefic, and it is. And it is also a magnifying lens. And in my experience, both in my own life living through Jupiter transits, as well as being a mundane astrologer, it can just be more is more is more. It can be a bit like a fire hose. So there can be so much coming at us that it's hard to pick. And so, and that's where you really want to feel into things. So let me just take a look here at what's going on. So right now, as I'm recording, we have Jupiter at 29 degrees, 58 minutes of Pisces. Again, Jupiter doesn't ingress into Aries until like around 5:30 tonight, Pacific. So it'll be evening on the East Coast. Now that could be some protests getting out of hand, quote unquote out of hand. I don't think they can get out of hand at this point. My Sag Mars is riled up. I'm like, start a riot. Frankly, I think being well behaved won't help us right now. Just saying. All of those. I mean, the fact that they're like, oh my God, they're protesting outside of the Supreme Court's justices' homes. That's okay. The Supreme Court just decided to come into our uteruses. I think it's a fair exchange. I like that it was neighbors that organized the first protest. I thought, well done, neighbors. Like, geez. Before I go forward, I'm going to put my political analyst hat on. This is not about abortion rights. It is not. It's about stripping voting rights. It's about repealing all of the ground. How many of you in the comments put a heart? How many of you remember that in the 90s marital rape was still legal? It was not even considered a real deal. They were debating that when I was a young married woman. Yeah. Beth, they actually don't think we can do anything about it. I don't think they care if we riot. I don't think they care if we burn things down. I think I want to know what other shady shit they're doing to bring us up. I think they're hoping for protests and things like that. And because I think they believe they're legally going to get away with it. That's a little frightening to me. But this is a power grab. This is Pluto and Capricorn in the final stage where the status quo is going to hang on for all it's got. And then we move into Pluto and Aquarius. That's a 20-year run. Okay? And that's why I've been saying we've got to communicate, collaborate, and play, and not just sit in our own self-interest, and learn to listen to one another, and learn to communicate with one another. Most of us do not have great training in these things, and unfortunately, identity politics on the left kind of has people fractured a little bit as well. You know, like we don't. The one thing that the other side does right is they lockstep, and it's we don't. You know, we hold each other accountable. Things like that. They don't hold each other accountable. They're just like, oh, well. So we have to maintain our integrity. But at the same time, we really need to push forward on the agenda. And that's why we have voting information in the Discord, where to register, how to look up your issues in your state and your local levels. Please vote down ballot this year. It's very, very important. This is going to be a crazy summer. Now, I do also believe that the other side, I believe they underestimate where we're at as a population. And so I think they may not be able to get away with things. Can go a couple of ways. We have a lot of volatile information volatile energy coming up through the summer. So it's going to be very, very fascinating as from an intellectual level to observe. As an individual, it's like, oh, scary stuff. So it's okay to be afraid, by the way. If any of you thought I was saying don't be afraid, I'm just saying fear and worry rob us of the ability to plan, the ability to take forward motion, the ability to take action. And so it's okay to feel the feelings, but as quick as possible to rein it in. I know when I was a young woman and I was facing some pretty incredible odds, if the amount of times that it appeared that there was opposing forces in my life. Some did not wish me to be here. Some were on my side. But there were times I would just be like Rocky down on the canvas. Just be like Rocky down on the canvas. And I'd have to just sit there and deep breath and get back up again, shaky legs and everything, both metaphorically as well, psychologically, emotionally. And so these are things to remember. We are very, very strong, okay? And looking for protection, we're going to have to be our own protection. That's a very, very obvious, especially as we move very, very near the Pluto in Aquarius era, is communication, collaboration, and forward motion in a unified manner. That's what's going to win the day. That's why I kept making fun of the TikTokers back in 2020 saying, Pluto in Aquarius is going to be unity consciousness. Like, sure. Yeah. No, it's going to be ballin', that's for sure. We are strong, Katie. We are strong. We're always stronger than we think we are. And we manage to get through things people think they can't get through, but we can. and we can get through to the other side as well. And this is something to remember, and we do that best by having support. And that's why creating community is something very, very important to me. So we take individual responsibility for our words, our actions, our information, and we take collective responsibility for the bigger picture. And I think that's really important. It's a blend of both. Okay, we can't be responsible for other people in the same way. We can hold each other accountable, but at the same time, we have to understand what accountability is. And one of the things that really kind of bothers me that I see very prevalent is apologies. When people, it's like, I really want to apologize, I was wrong. It's more like think before you do stuff, and just because somebody's offended doesn't mean they're owed an apology either. I offend men all the time. Sometimes I do it as a hobby when I go on to LinkedIn and I harass middle-aged white men. I haven't done it in a while because it's distracting. It distracts me from what I'm doing because it's addictive, okay? But when I will actually Dave back, I don't care if I've offended him, okay? He's not owed an apology. Oh my gosh, what a world we're living in. So Mercury retrograde is not inherently bad, but it is a time to review, revise, go over paperwork, take a look at things, look at our own internalized misogyny, our own internalized patriarchy. Stop reaffirming the tropes of, I need a man to make me feel safe. I don't know about you, but I have never had a man protect me. Think about it. Have you literally ever had a man actually protect you? Ever. Ever. I once got pulled. I had somebody actually rescue me out of the water. It was a lifeguard, and that was their job. I was 17. But I think that's the only time. Whereas I've had a lot of men give mouth music to it, like, oh, baby, I'd protect you. Yeah, I've always had to protect myself. Always. So it's there's these ideals versus reality, and Mercury retrograde in Gemini, it's time to review those. Like, is it real? There's nothing wrong with you, by the way, if you've had to defend yourself, because guess what? That's the natural world. If we want to look at actual nature as mammals, as a species, all mammals, regardless of reproductive organs or identity, are capable of defense. Okay. Am I trying to rile people up? Yeah. May I rile you up? Please let me inspire you, because my Sag Mars is getting a little bit miffed. So, okay. Let's take a quick break here on the podcast. I'm talking to the patrons behind the scenes, and we'll go over a little bit more about Mercury retrograde and what it means through the houses. And so if you want to know how Mercury retrograde is going to impact you and your astrological chart, then you want to make sure you're on Patreon and you can watch the replay of the behind the scenes action. When we come back, I will be giving a patron shout out before I roast Bill Maher. All right, it's time for another patron shout out. This is like my favorite part of the show, because without patrons, we would have no show. So big thank you to everyone who contributes. We are looking at, and I put my glasses down, grabbing those as fast as I can because I have a reading soon. We've got Brittany, Kelly, Vicky, Beth, Sibstar, Jackie, Ryan, Renee, Maria, Tara, Carrie, Jacqueline, Allie, Kamal, Kristen, Allison, Dee, Rachel, Gabby, Denise, Krista, Stephanie, Jennifer, Samantha, Joe, Tiffany, Amber, Janelle, Aaron, Robin, Suzanne, Gabby, James, Lawrence, Chesney, Stephanie, Angela, Grisella, Laura, Amber, Elaine, Maggie, Jerry, Jessica. Oh my gosh, the list is long. Wow, that's so many new people. Thank you so much for joining. And who do we have here on the live podcast? Let me see it. I know we've got McDubs, we have Becky, we've got Zach, we've got Shelby, we got Katie, we've got let's see, all right, Beth, Lizette, Saffron, Alicia, Kimberlyn, and that is a cool crowd. I can't see everybody's names. I'm just seeing comments. So thank you guys for joining. We're having some good conversations here. We just went over how Mercury Retrograde is going to impact you by house in your astrology chart. So if you're a patron, make sure you watch the replay. It's in your Patreon, okay? And if you're not a patron, then you need to be one to watch it. I will also put it in our Discord as well. Okay, so what's up next? Oh yeah, Bill Maher. We need different music for this one. We're gonna put on some fighting music. All right. We'll be right back, and we're going to roast the hell out of Bill Maher, because he's a self-proclaimed liberal who would have us all end up in the shitter. All right, we are roasting Bill Maher because I can't stand him. And when I looked at his chart, I was like, oh, I know why I don't like him. On one hand, long back in like the 2000s, I thought he was mildly funny, but the older he's gotten, the more boomer he is, and he totally is a boomer. In fact, he's like the most boomery boomer on the planet. He's got Pluto and Jupiter. They're just, they're both in Leo, they're conjunct, and that Pluto and Leo generation is kind of why we're here. If you want to know why we have all those old people around still making decisions and still opinionating, and they won't make room for younger people, because it's fucking Pluto and Leo. Are there good people in the Pluto and Leo generation? Well, of course there are. But the main reason is they take up a lot of room and a lot of space, and notice they fucked everything up for everybody else and took their ball and went home and went, well, you guys just don't work hard enough. Such a Pluto in Leo thing on the negative level. Now, I'm going to give you the same caveat that I gave my patrons. I'm going to be saying some really mean things about Bill Maher. If you have placements like his, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about him. Okay? I'm not talking about you. I'm not saying every placement like that acts that way. I am talking about this one individual. So Bill Maher has a Libra rising, and when Libra risings are negative, they are actually highly manipulative. They also want, especially since he's a boomer, he wants free ass, free grass, and free gas without consequences. These are the people who are totally into free love. I'm going to be crass here. Free pussy with no consequences. Okay. They didn't want to be responsible. And actually, he's one of the most confirmed bachelors in Hollywood, because he doesn't. He sees marriage as a prison. And I'm not going to disagree. I have a Libra moon. I'm going to tell you, marriage isn't always a great institution. But he doesn't want the responsibilities. And there's a big difference to not wanting to be owned, which is my perspective as a woman, versus somebody who doesn't want to take responsibility for what they do. So there's that. He wants, again, free ass, free grass, free gas. And the reason I say that is my Pluto and generation parents said, ass, gas, or grass, nobody rides for free. Well, he would like that, except for him. For him, it's selective. So he's got Saturn and Mars in Sagittarius in the third house. That's why he speaks with authority. Okay, he speaks with authority because he has Saturn and Mars conjunct. He's actually kind of a pussy, though. I have Mars in Sag. I realize why I don't like him. He can't do anything right in my eyes. He could change tomorrow. I still wouldn't like him. And that's why I'm very biased against him. This is not an unbiased roast, okay? I'm not even pretending to be unbiased. I don't want to be. He should have been a journalist. He should have been a journalist. He should have done something a little bit more intellectual. He opines with great strength, okay? And those of us with Mars and Sag can be quite good at that. He's got this displacement in the 3rd house, which gives him a strong authoritative voice. He also has his North Node in Sagittarius. So politics is something that fits right in. So does religion. He talks on both things. He's kind of in his North Node there. However, he should have done something more principled with more ethics, okay? And as much as he says he'll always stand by what he says, he has backtracked anytime he's been pushed into a corner, okay? He really has. I've watched his stuff for years because one of my people in my life years ago watched him a lot, and he would drive me nuts. He'll read a book or speak to a single person and consider himself an expert. If you listen to how he talks over BIPOC guests or women or people identifying as women on his show, he is always having to be the expert over them. And because he has a wee-wee and he's white, therefore he must be right. People who claim to be liberal, who act that way or think political correctness, they're the ones who turn that narrative. They're the ones who are like, well, free speech. And they say heinous things in the excuse of free speech. They say, he's a political tool, by the way. And I mean that in all ways that word can be inferred. He is a propaganda mouthpiece. He works for a corporation. Those corporations have political agendas, and he is a mouthpiece for them. He would be too afraid to lose his money to do the right thing. Like Tucker Carlson, he's got some Taurus there. That Taurus moon has very strong opinions, very strong... he can't be swayed, and he doesn't want to lose. So what he would do is if you were playing a game with this dude, he would literally flip the table, then lose. And that is why he's such a freaking twat waffle. He is so ensconced in what he believes. What's really funny is he's got that moon in the 7th house, and yet he's so against being partnered. And I'm like, wow, mommy issues. But anyway, right now he's currently giving the narrative that, his mom was told to abort him and didn't, right? And so he's against abortion because he could have been, taken out. And I'm like, really? And he had a great guest. I can't remember her name. You guys would know her, though. She's a politician. And she was like, well, and so here we are. You're still here. Your mom had a choice, and she executed it. Or if his mom had a choice. But it's having the choice, right? And so he's one of those people who's going to drive the argument on it's about choice or not choice. When the argument is they're repealing our rights as human beings, and we're not codified as people in the law, right? So, he's driving a narrative to distract the argument and under the guise of freedom of speech. But he is a propaganda mouthpiece, especially with Saturn and Mars in the 3rd house. He should have been an investigative journalist. He should have gained more credentials than he did. But he acts like he's like the king of the universe. Partly, he's got a 0-degree Aquarius sun. Pluto gonna bite his butt. Pluto gonna bite his butt. That happens next year in March. We'll see some stuff go down for Bill Maher. He just had his Venus return earlier in the year. He's got Saturn moving through that 5th house. Saturn will, sometime next year, be moving through his 6th. I don't think he's going to lose his career or anything, but I just think he's going to have a bumpy ride. I look forward to that. He's a bit of a nationalist. People will view him as a nationalist. He's actually all in it for Bill Maher. He's a very self-interested person. But with that midhaven in Cancer, people see him and view him as all in it for America, because he's willing to, go after and promote things, ridiculous ideas, especially when it comes to American politics and being an Islamic phobic person. I hate the term Islamophobia because George Bush is the one who got that going. By the way, guys, we can blame Trump all we want, but this goes so far back. And George Bush's administration, it was hugely responsible for where we sit today. And it was stuff I was warning about. And if any of you listening are my former in-laws, because I know you stalk me on social media, you owe me a fucking apology. And keep watching Bill Maher, because he reinforces your limited views of the world. All right, I've said that. I said what I said. I'm not taking it back. Okay, how's that? How's that for gritty? There's reasons. There's reasons we're a single lady. Oh, the single ladies. Oh, the single ladies. Yeah. So he's actually got a lot going on in that 8th house right now. And Mercury Retrograde is moving through his 9th house. So if he misspeaks in his next show, don't be surprised. And I hope he gets taken to task. I hope he gets huge blowback from anything he says. So that's kind of my roast. He's a twat waffle. He should have been more altruistic. He should have been more thoughtful in his communications with that North Node in Sagittarius, more philosophical. He comes off like he tried. He's actually often on his soapbox instead of doing the research, instead of going through and doing more than opining with strength. And so, so I don't like him. Never have, never will. And that's why I roasted his chart. Now remember, if you have any placements like him, I wasn't talking about you. You could be perfectly wonderful. He could have been a perfectly wonderful human being. He didn't have to be an asshat. He chose to be an asshat. We all have choices, people. If I could teach that, if I could get that understood, that you are not destined to be the way you are. You can make choices. Energy expresses in a multitude of levels. You can always choose something higher. And higher doesn't necessarily not mean proactive or defensive, okay? We can all, part of our human experience is the grit. It's better to be angry than depressed, okay? So there we go. Better to be angry than depressed. And so instead of getting depressed over the world we live in, get angry. And be like Jen, my mod. She was so upset. She lives in a red state. She's a young woman. She's still in her reproductive life. And she's just getting started as an adult person. And she channeled her fury into reorganizing our Discord. And she's doing an amazing job. And I think she's a very thoughtful, very considerate person. And she's doing an amazing job. So patience as we get that thing reorganized. But that was a great way to funnel her abject rage at what could be in her near future. That's how we do it. As a really good friend of mine who was an OG hippie, also Pluto and Leo, who most of the time isn't a dickhead, said, don't get mad, get organized. I say most of the time because he could be sometimes. But don't get mad, get organized. And so that's why we have all of those resources now in the Discord. If you don't have to be a patron to join that Discord, okay, guys? We have patron-only content locked up. Okay, so you're welcome to come into the Discord. We have resources for you to look up voting on the issues in your state. We're not telling you how to vote. We're not telling you what to do. Obviously, I'm a leftist, and I don't think anybody who's on the right side of the spectrum is ever going to be attracted to what I have to say. I hope not. Actually, if they're ever attracted to what I have to say, then they're not as right-leaning as they think they are. So I'm not going to ever tell you how to vote. I'm just going to provide resources. I don't want to tell you what to believe. I'm going to provide information. That's why I'm saying we've all got programming to unpack. I will point out straight what's programming. Now, what you want to put in its place is up to you. It's up to you. So we live in interesting times. It's going to get more interesting. We've got the lunar eclipse. I did the last episode on that. We've got the lunar eclipse coming up on May 15th. We've got Jupiter and Mars meeting on my mother's birthday, May 29th. I'll talk about that in the next episode. We've got Mercury stationing direct on June 2nd. The new moon in Cancer looks very interesting. Our solstice looks interesting. July is a shit show. I'll talk about that later. And we have eclipse season in the fall as well, and the final eclipse of 2022 happens on election day. It's very important to get organized, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Notice I'm not starting a movement. I'm pointing you to existing resources. Okay, it's not time to necessarily start anything new. It is time to support people who have been involved. And if you've been wondering why they haven't been successful, it's because they didn't have enough support and they didn't get any media attention. Okay, so there are people who have been on the ground for decades. And right around my birthday, right after my birthday, it's just insane. July, August is crazy. And I talked about that in the year ahead forecast. I just didn't have the full measure of the detail, but I will say go check that out if you've got access to the 2022 year ahead. If not, you can find that linked in the description below, where I went month by month. Even I spooked myself. I went back and looked at my slides from that presentation. I went, holy crap, I was really on the ball. That was so. I freak myself out sometimes with my accuracy. Also, I'm kind of looking at the camera in disbelief because without makeup and my hair back, not like looking like my normal feminine self, I look like my dad. It took me so long to be okay with looking like my father. I used to not look in mirrors because it freaked me out. And so it's really bizarre to hear my voice coming out of what looks like my dad's face. Talk about freak yourself out. But that's kind of the healing we go through. When you can actually look and go, I realized as long as I was not able to do that, I didn't have my own power. So, from the beginning of the podcast when I was talking about us owning our power, I mean that. I'm not diminishing your experiences. I don't talk about my stuff because I don't want to trigger people. It's extreme. I've made world-class psychologists bawl their eyes out, and then I had to fire them because, you can't work with somebody who's over, invested in the pain story, It's an extreme story. And I can look back and go, that was really hard to live through. And there were times I didn't think I wanted to live through it. And there were times that I had to make a concerted decision to live through it. And then I had 2 beautiful kids. I purposely chose my children. I purposely did family planning. I chose them. And I chose them because I wanted to prove that you could be a really good parent, that you weren't stuck, that abuse was not an excuse to pass on trauma. And I wanted to love somebody more than I could imagine, and I did. You can't imagine that. Oh, I've got 1 hour, 11 minutes with 11 viewers. That's important, guys. But yeah, we can. And I'm not saying everybody has to have kids to do that. I'm a Cancerian and I have the North Node in my 4th house in Pisces. So learning to love more than I could imagine was important because how else could I love myself? You can't love anybody that way if you don't learn to love you. And so you are not defined or described by your experiences. You are inherently valuable, and there's nothing that happens to you that takes away that value. You understand that in here, no one can control you, okay? No one can control you. And I learned that as a very little girl. Unfortunately, it was unfortunate circumstances that taught me that. But it's why I teach it now. And I don't think I could be as authentic. I don't think I could be as powerful a speaker on the topic if I had not had this life path. And if it helps one person, that's good enough. All right, guys, I got to get ready for readings. It's always good to have you here. Next podcast episode, we're going to talk about the Jupiter-Mars conjunction, or more correctly, the Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Aries, happening on my mother's birthday, May 29th. And I think I'll do a group reading for that as well. So stay tuned. If you're a patron, I'll be announcing that to my patrons to sign up. And we'll do that group reading. All right, guys. As always, love you forever.